Greetings, everyone. I'm Paul Wang, and I have a podcast called Daology. And today here, I'm going to be in conversation with Cristina.
And Cristina Impoverished on YouTube.
Oh, Cristina Impoverished on YouTube, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can put a link to her channel.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cristina and I, we've known each other for
About a year.
About a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And we primarily work in the context of acupuncture. And so she's been receiving some care from me to support.
Very good care. Highly recommend.
Oh, thank you.
And acupuncturist.
And recently we had a conversation regarding mental health, and we thought we'd just sort of have a dialogue and share some experiences and some thoughts and maybe some suggestions about that field. For myself, of course, I have firsthand experience in terms of mental health and challenges regarding that. As a human, I think it's normal that we have intense emotions that are triggered due to life circumstances. For me, many of them were more during my childhood time, when I was emigrating back and forth from Taiwan to, various cities in the U.S. I think for me, the main challenge was more, I guess it felt like loneliness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it felt like isolation. Underlying was probably a fear. A fear, especially as a young person, not feeling like you belong to different groups.
Yeah.
And I think maybe part of that is personality. There wasn't any, I think, single incident. Of course, there were some, let's say, relatively minor, but you can't really even say for sure how substantial they affect you, even if it doesn't seem like a big deal, right? If you're more sensitive, then it could have quite an impact. And so when I was younger, I think I was let's say 8 or 9 or 10, around that age, and I was in Chicago, and I encountered some sort of racial kind of situations, right? That kind of were challenging, right? Me and my sister. So Again, I don't think I was scarred by the incident, but I think it definitely perhaps
made an impact.
Pushed me further internally, right?
Oh, further into yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Where it felt safe, right? Not to open up, not to be seen, not to be heard. And I think in the decades since, I think my sort of personal development has been try to open up and share the gifts actually that I discovered by those inner explorations. So the pro and con. The pro of having that sort of psychological orientation is that I was able to go into an inner world, and my imagination and creativity I was able to tap into. And of course I also read a lot of books, so I encountered a lot of different realms and dimensions in that context, and then sort of just mix them with my own ideas. And so almost like a little monk. I didn't go out into the monastery, but I kind of went internally
Created
into
an internal monastery.
or some cave somewhere. And so on hindsight, everyone has their path, and for me, I can't say that it was bad, but just kind of this basic sketch of my sort of we kind of have this context of mental health, but I'm like the psychological development. And so later on, I became very interested with some of these things I encountered, developed them as hobbies, and I became passionate about it, and I started to teach it.
Okay.
And I think that's what eventually brought me out. Actually seeing that, wow, like people are really inspired or benefit from some of these insights that I share.
Like to share, yeah.
And so I think my default setting is still more inward.
Right.
But I've had many opportunities, especially before things shut down with the plague, to travel around the world and share and teach some of these. You can call it curriculum, or this transmissions in a couple dozen countries, and also on medical missions, seeing how, like, talking about struggles, right? Like
just
seeing,
talking to people and sharing their life experiences.
yeah, a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And realizing that, hey, pretty much everyone has similar themes.
Yeah, we all have our struggles. We
Yeah.
all have difficulties and as well as joys and pleasant things.
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of see more the humanity if you have the opportunity, to encounter. So nowadays, I think I want to turn to you and see what your sort of journey has been, and perhaps if you want to share some sort of developmental kind of insights or even challenges in terms of mental health for you.
Well, yeah, for me, mental health has always been tied to, my home life and circumstances, because of the fact that my parents were immigrants. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I could say my mom is I will clearly say super intelligent person, but a complicated person and a person who had very high expectations for her kids.
Yeah.
And, every parent or every good parent, I think, is trying to do the best they can for their children, but to the best of their understanding. And sometimes their understanding is not very good. So for myself, I was very unhappy living at home, always envisioned myself living alone with a cat. And so, in the future, that was what I wanted for myself. Yeah. And so when I moved out, I had, trigger that made me realize, if I don't go ahead and take the initiative and do it, there's nothing that's going to I'm not going to escape this. There's no one who's going to help me, or nothing is going to happen without me just ripping the Band-Aid and moving out. And my mom never forgave me for that. And I think I had a lot of depression having to do with, her lack of understanding and forgiveness for that life choice. And that's the thing, is that, I look at her and I feel like there's a lot of trying to put herself in my position and not being able to just not wrap her head around it. And I think that's why she, never did forgive me, or, at least verbally and stuff. But, that going back to mental health. So, being rejected by one of the two most important people in your life up until then, it's very traumatic. And so I had already felt depressed, because of just, that household. But once I had that further trauma of, rejection and being on my own completely, and I had no friends because of the way my household was, then I experienced more deep depression, and there was a period of my life when I was younger, nearer to the time that I moved out of the house and was going to college, that I remember I was thinking about going to college, thinking about dying all the time. I wish I was dead. It would be so much easier to die. And it was just, I really don't think I've ever really seriously considered doing it, but I have had times in my life when it's been a very appealing thing to just not go on, not live anymore. And so it's definitely one of my low points. And the thing is that I feel like Obama will go down in history for his Obamacare, because I was not medicated. I knew I was depressed. I was able to go in and out of therapy, but there was never a path for me to be gotten onto the correct medication and staying on it, because I couldn't afford it. Yeah. And so it wasn't until very late in life that I got onto Medi-Cal, which I feel like has helped, make me a more productive and useful citizen in the world. But just connecting to that Medi-Cal, I'm trying to think which happened first. Me getting on Medi-Cal. Oh yeah, no, I think it was me getting on Medi-Cal. When my dad got Alzheimer's, unfortunately for my mom, they needed my help. That disease is horrible, and it's very hard on everybody, the caretakers, and everybody needed to lend a hand. And so I started being invited back into that household again. I see. Yeah. But seeing my dad suffer like that, it just made me so sad. So I do remember at one point being at the Social Security office, and applying for like any kind of benefits, being financially struggling so much, and them saying there's nothing we could do, and crying like they were about to call security to throw me out because there was the emotional reaction to the lack of help was so strong in combination with the existing depression that was happening at that time. And I guess I'm partially revisiting in the retelling of it. But luckily, my dad's Alzheimer's basically made me even poorer than I already was, and so it did make me say there might be some resources, and even though there weren't any financial resources that would have come in handy, which is what I was seeking at Social Security, there was at least Medi-Cal, which helped me get some of the medication I needed. But even before my dad got sick, I experienced what I now recognize as a manic episode. But that was the first time I can ever think of something like that happening. So I was already in my late 20s to early 30s when the manic part of my manic depression presented itself. Up until then, it had only been depression. And the thing is that I had never experienced it before. The people who I was friends with had never experienced it before. And so I didn't recognize it at the time at all. It wasn't until later in life when my dad had almost passed away. He was really far along into his Alzheimer's that I met somebody who brings up a whole other really important topic. He was a male who was being domestically abused because of his homosexuality. His partner was threatening him, threatening to expose his identity to his family. And homosexuality is taboo in the Catholic Mexican culture. It basically was successfully blackmailing him and mistreating him. And I was not working that much at the time, but I didn't have any huge responsibilities, and I was like, I'm going to do anything I can do to help this person. And it all culminated with me trying to help him, but getting into a situation was trying to get the police to his abuser's house, and the police instead found me to be manic and had me hospitalized.
Well, it was then. Were they?
That was that was when I realized I was manic. I don't think even then, I really don't remember that the doctors even said you're manic. I think they just said, why are you doing this? But what I already did a video about for a friend is that for me, being hospitalized is probably, hopefully, going to be one of the best things that ever happened for my mental health, because of the fact that, like I said, I had experienced severe near suicidal states, and during those states I had some terrible thoughts about myself, and those thoughts I never said to anybody. I mentioned I didn't have very many friends, if any, when especially the first time. So the fact that I was in this manic state, but I was with people who were clearly, very way less energy level than me. But these people were saying some of the same exact things that I thought in my worst moments ever. I'm a failure. I'm a disappointment to my family. The world would be better off without me. Nobody would care if I died. I'm one of the worst people in the world. I mean, that specifically, I remember a lady who I had just thought of as super nice. She said she was an older lady, and I feel like her 60s probably. And she said that about herself, and I'm the worst person in the world. And I was just like, we can't all be the worst person in the world.
Sorry.
And you're like super nice. I haven't ever seen you do anything that would make you
at least one person worse than you, right?
So the fact that these horrible thoughts, were coming out of the mouths of people in completely different life circumstances. Another person who I remember expressing some of these things about being a failure and horrible was a guy with glasses in his 50s, balding and stuff. And so how can it be that a Mexican American woman, her late 30s, a white woman in her mid 60s, and a balding, white guy in his mid 50s. How can we all be the worst person in the world? How can we all be the total failures who the world would be better off without? It's not because it's true. Right. It's because our brain chemistry is off. And so for me, just like seeing that for myself, or, having experienced that, like, I feel like even if I ever get, my medication off and get to a point where I'm very low, I feel like I'm always going to be able to remember, hey, there was a point when other people were saying that same stuff. Yeah, don't believe those thoughts, because those thoughts are just deception. Right. And you wouldn't let leukemia take you, or another, long-term condition. If you got leukemia, you wouldn't just let yourself die. You would fight. So you need to fight these feelings that you have, because it's just the same. It's just your body malfunctioning, and it's just it's something that can be fixed.
That's such an interesting journey, and sometimes you think hospital, at least for me, and perhaps I have a bias because I
never
was
having experience.
I was going into that realm, Western medicine.
You were a pre-med student.
Pre-med at Cal. I wanted to go into surgery, and I did hospital internships, and I saw what that was like, and so for me, it's a very stressful situation, and it's very high tech. A lot of diagnosis, but what actually touched me is that it was the human interaction. There were of course the medication and all the other medical interventions. But what I got from your story is that what was really healing, or was actually one of the tools that you actually were able to extract and apply, is insight. The insight, like, wow, that. How can this be? How can there be so many
worst people in the world?
And how can it be that people with seemingly different backgrounds are telling the same story about themselves? And like I shared, I was traveling around the world, but very similarly, I came to the same conclusion that people actually, maybe I was in Greece and someone was talking in Greek, and I through a translator, they were talking about their struggles with their, partner relationship. And then the next week I'm in Portugal and someone is saying the exact same thing,
Right.
Different gender, different, ethnicity. It's like,
different points of life, ages and stuff. Yeah.
But there's almost like a mythic level in which, our life kind of unfolds and connects to. So I think that, maybe we can kind of move into the next kind of prompt, is that in terms of the story, again, I'm not worthy. The world is better off without me.
I failed.
I have, basically shame. Right?
I've let everyone down.
Right. Yeah. And what do you think that comes from? Is that just at some age, I don't know what age, 5 or 7 or 9, we and these other, this white lady and this, and you guys 50s, figured out that was the truth? Or where did that story come from? Did it come from the inside? Or for you, what was the source of this, this program, in a way, this idea?
Well, for me, I think it was clearly my mom. My mom was, like I said, a very, very negative person, and very intelligent, but I think probably her mom was also abusive in a certain way, emotionally. So she was raising me the best way, the way that she understood the world. But the way she understood the world, a woman, the fact that you're a woman, you need to be doing housework, you need to be, having kids, you need to you need to be certain things. And like the fact that I was her daughter, you need to be Catholic, you need to believe these things that I believe.
I see.
Which for sure, like I knew from I was a big fan of talk radio from really early on. I think about 12 years old. I clearly remember being somebody, this is horrible, when Polly Klaas was kidnapped, when she was finally found, I was just like, oh, finally they're going to talk about something else. And it's horrible to think that about a murdered child, but I just remember because I knew that I remember that was the
But the thing, it was a child of a certain demographic. Right?
Oh, that's true.
There are many children who are missing.
Yeah, suffer in the world. Yep, for sure. Yeah, because she was a little white girl.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the bias, right? And at least this culture. So what I hear is that if you did not fulfill these standards and these criteria, these stipulations, and adopt these sort of, values and mores of your mom, right? Well, if you did, let's say, good daughter, right?
Doing everything I want you to.
Check off all the marks,
Yeah.
And
then, cleaning my room, that was a huge point of contention. Like, I still to this day hate cleaning my room. But like that was like, oh, you don't have that many chores. Keep your room clean, and you can't do it. You're failing by not.
And because, I guess, I believe we all have a kind of creative force. And actually depress, right? Or repress or suppress is, to me, like, why do we use that term? Like, what are we actually depressing, pressing down, holding down? I think it is that kind of creative force. Some would call it the soul force, something like that. And I believe that it wants to express in a unique way for each person.
Right.
And unfortunately, some parents, just because they feel like they biologically, brought you into this world, that, they project their, sort of box, or fit you into that box, right? But I think what I see for you is the struggle of not fulfilling
those expectations.
Yeah. And but wanting the love, right? And acknowledgement of someone, like you said, who is two parents, right?
The center of your world. Yeah.
So I hear that, and then especially in terms of like gender roles.
Yes, definitely. Right? Especially as affected by Mexican culture, which I think has an element of misogyny because of the machismo that is, more unique. I don't know if it's totally unique because I have not experienced life in the rest of Latin America, but definitely very different from American culture. And if you want me to give you a quick example, I remember when I was in Mexico, I watched this show that was the equivalent of Family Feud. It was called 100 Mexicans Said. And, the question was, what is it okay to hit? And the answers were things like ball. And one of the guys says, your wife.
Oh, my.
And the thing is that, for me, that's a really clear indication that somewhere in this culture... I don't think it was one of the answers actually up there. But the fact that's really inappropriate to say. Why would you hit your wife? When is it ever okay to hit your wife? The fact that you would joke about it, it's not that serious to you.
Yeah.
That really affected me and my thought that, hey, Mexican culture really, you're a second class citizen if you are a woman.
I wonder how far back that goes too. I mean, like you said, there's also the Catholic religious aspect to that too, right?
Yeah, and that's
which is
something...
is an importation to that land.
Yes.
Right?
But it's something that I didn't learn until this year that I went to Mexico, and I spent time with my wonderful cousin Estela, who's a lawyer. Who she being a lawyer, has a lot of intellectual curiosity. The state that we're in is the state where the second founder of our country. There's the leader of the independence is Miguel Hidalgo, and then his second in command is Miguel. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his, and it's not Miguel, because that's his friend. Yeah. Anyway, it's Morelos. It's a guy named Morelos. And so the town we're from is called Morelia because, it was the town that Morelos, has a large involvement with. But because of that, she gave me a lot of information about Mexican history, including what really strikes me is, and that I didn't know, Miguel Hidalgo and Morelos were priests. Morelos was his student.
Okay.
And that's how their friendship or their relationship was. And so for me, the fact that from the beginning, the Mexican image, the Catholicism has been there from the beginning. And, Catholicism, I think, in and of itself brings a lot of misogyny. But I was also quickly going to touch on the fact that, our countries differ in the United States and Mexico in that the United States, it was families building homesteads. In Mexico, not quite so much. I think rape of indigenous women is a way larger part of the history of how, Mexico's population grew. And so there's already, even without the Catholicism, there's the colonization culture that we're inherently better than you, so we can you're less than human to us, and it's okay for us to rape you.
There are all those threads. And so we inherit them right down the line intergenerationally, and the traumas too actually epigenetically change our biology. And so it's and therefore even realizing that, right, there's no easy solutions, right? And I think we each individually have to do the work, but what I lament is perhaps we don't know, right? We shouldn't idealize too, like pre-colonial, Mexico, whatever,
true.
Or pre-Catholic influence, what were the societies like? Were they more egalitarian? And this goes back even further, like when, perhaps even agriculture started, before, we were more with, flowing with the seasons, right? And kind of more deferring to Mother Nature's cycles rather than sort of imposing, our technology upon it, right? And so I think the undercurrent is subjugation of the feminine, and it plays out in culture as machismo, therefore patriarchy, etc. And whatever the forms of it. But I think if we talk about it more in Chinese medicine, where we talk about basically this energy that communicates between the mind and the body, and some of us may have heard of the term qi.
Even I have, yes.
So in terms of, let's say, again, back to our idea of mental health, right? That there has to be a balance between the light and the dark, right? Because there are situations in life which actually anger, or even depression, or grief, or anxiety, or even fear would be actually a normal response.
Yes.
Right. And from Western physiology, that would be a sort of a stimulus that goes through our nervous system via our senses, that triggers the autonomic nervous system, right?
Oh, okay.
To shoot, say, adrenaline or cortisol, right? To prepare to respond in a defensive way, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And when we, from Chinese medicine, when we block that qi, or when we don't express that energy, then in order to actually stop that, we need to actually exert force internally, right? It's like you can say that emotional expression is a sort of extroversion, right? Which I struggled with for a while.
Right.
So all that energy went inwards. So depression, I think, is a kind of holding back, and disengaging.
Of internal energy.
Right.
Yeah.
And not feeling like you're safe to be able to communicate and express, right? And perhaps, in a lot of situations I know, because it's not safe, because the ones with power and authority will either punish us or reject us.
Right? Yes.
And then in terms of long term, short term and then long term. Short term creates inflammation. Long term, it creates a sort of, interesting, the word inflammation has the word flame or fire in it, right? So it leads to a state of burnout. Or you mentioned when you were in your late 20s, you had this manic episode.
Right.
Right? And sometimes I see that, right? Then you hear manic depressive, right? This kind of sort of stuckness where the energy is not expressed, and then suddenly it explodes outwards, right? So I think that's actually a very sort of normal and natural progression.
Oh, okay.
So in my view, there's in a way nothing wrong, actually. It's actually...
with the way my process happens.
Actually, your mind body has a wisdom, has an intelligence, like, okay, we can no longer hold on to this energy, or it's reaching a point of exhaustion. So either we implode or we let it out, right? And of course, if it's suddenly let out, that's called an explosion, right?
Yeah.
A manic episode, would say.
Right, yeah.
If there were avenues, and traditionally, again, because we're bringing up, sort of more, let's say, more native or natural or indigenous cultures, pre sort of anti-feminine, anti-Mother Earth kind of philosophies, that there were these honoring of cycles, which connotes flow,
Okay.
and also coming together, right? Which I think you can say is a more of a yin versus yang, is an opening and sharing, right? And often those would be done like during regular ceremonies, like full moon or equinox or solstice. So there was a regular period of time where you can call it even a kind of communal catharsis.
Okay.
Or
so
ecstasis.
even we're going, like, speaking of, like, lunar cycles. So I mean, I think what you're talking about is Easter is is in spring, like it's the Christian calendar, but it coincides with the previous pagan celebrations of the spring.
Yes.
And Christmas is like
solstice.
Yeah, exactly.
I
so
mean,
even Western culture has those.
There's so much of that, right? Those kind
of the more natural cycles in the world.
However, you mentioned priests, right? Like the founders of
Mexico. Yes.
Mexico were priests, and nothing about priests per se categorically, although, we don't have to bring up the sort of more recent sort of, kind of abuses that were propagated by certain kind of ideologies. But I'm speaking more towards priests as a sort of gatekeeper for contacting these states of, let's say, these healthy mental states. Right, where you can release and let go and express and be seen and not feel like you're crazy for feeling sad or mad or or suicidal even. And I encounter it too, more so in my clientele, that actually there's a pandemic of suicidality, especially with young people. I mean,
would you say more young men too? Or?
Young men more, yeah.
Yes,
if you want to, yeah.
If so again, look at the statistics. So that's
I think it's like
in your personal experience,
3.6 times more, men or boys, young men, suicide rate than women. And again, I think it has to do with what we're talking about, over this machismo thing, right? Because what does that mean? It's like, I can't handle my own emotions. I can't deal with my own sort of tender heart, right? Because that's sissy, right?
Yeah.
How can I tend towards the emotionality of your feminine partner or your children, right? And so if we subjugate that, even speaking, let's say, as a man, if we subjugate that, or in my personal experience, until I realized that if I wasn't able to handle my own emotions, which I see even in young boys, like my nephews are as emotional as my nieces, but at some point, because perhaps this machismo idea,
societal pressures,
that we are taught as men to hold it back, right? But I found out that was creating a block in my own sort of intimate relationships, because my partner would want to connect emotionally to me, but I wasn't able to. And that there would be a distrust. If I am blocking myself, I can't handle, emotions within, how can she trust me to handle hers?
Right, yeah, definitely.
So it's been a journey, and for me, I use the meditation, or kind of somatic psychotherapy, like movement, and try to interocept and really feel how emotions move through my body. And give them space to metabolize. Yeah.
But see, that's the thing, that I think that's the problem with the suicidality is so much higher in men than women, is that men are told to kind of suppress emotions to begin with, not to be emotional. So when they have strong emotions of sadness, they're really going to struggle even more, because it's so much more than just the typical life emotions that we go through.
Yeah. Suppression is one thing. I also see a lot. It's almost a disconnection. It's almost, I don't know if it's dismemberment or decapitation, where when this feeling emerges, often they kind of just intellectualize it rather than really simmer in it. And it could just be like you've expressed already in our conversation. Maybe they just need to cry a bit, right? Or they need to shout, or they need to, move, right? But
or talk to somebody. I
talk
think
to
that's
someone.
the most obvious thing that I did when I was depressed that would help a lot.
Yeah. So do we have that? Do most people have that? Hey brother, hey sister, I need to chat. I think a lot of people, again, it's like shame upon shame.
Yeah.
They have a shame that they feel this way, and they also have a shame to open up and feel judged if they share that they're not as strong, as put together as they seem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
as they're supposed to be as men or women.
Yeah, even women now.
Yeah,
right? Even women,
or
right?
or as students, like pressure that people are putting on their kids, or people are putting on themselves to get to a certain career goal or whatever the case may be.
By a certain age.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think if we kind of envision, or brainstorm a bit, what actually do you think? You personally, or you think your family or friends, or even if we expand out a bit more, what a healthy society, or what a society would need to become more mentally healthy? What are some of the things that you think would be necessary to cultivate?
Well, I think the big thing that I think not just with mental health, but with other large issues like racism is we actually need to acknowledge that it's a problem within our society, because the fact that we can't even acknowledge suicide, that there's a taboo about talking about suicide, how can we reach people who are suicidal if they they feel like they're going to be immediately judged by talking about it? So I think this conversation is just one of many that I hope will happen, where people talk about mental health. Maybe people start expressing, hey, I've experienced these mental health issues, or I had this family member who experienced this mental health issue. And, deeply sharing that what I feel overall most important message, you're still a worthy person. If your mental health is off, it doesn't matter. There's ways to get it fixed to where it's supposed to be. You still have a lot of potential good that you can do in the world, or meaning you can find in the world. Even though you are feeling this way now, we need to acknowledge that the mental health is not insurmountable, I think.
That's beautiful. I mean, you use the word meaning, which is kind of like when I teach, sort of self-cultivation, that's like the main currency that I kind of identify that is most worth investing in. Because I think there is sort of a meaning crisis nowadays due to distrust. I mean, we talked about like religion, right? Like a lot of people they don't trust in the their religion, or a lot of people are don't identify actually with that, which traditionally given all its pros and cons, at least was a source of guidance, at least a sort of meaning.
A community too.
At least a story, right? A myth. But we don't have that, right? And even like secular organizations like government, is also not so inspiring, to say the least, for most. So I can see why young kids, especially, like they're looking at adults, and trying to maybe scan for role models, inspiration. But I think a lot just do not see it. And in the leaders that are out there,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely our political situation right now, our society, like even we're recording this, they're on their third day trying to elect a house speaker, and one of the two major parties in our country, in our government, is divided and is I think irreparably broken. I hopefully it's a shambles. Not irreparably, but yeah, definitely, like, if you're looking to government for inspiration, that's not very inspiring to look at.
It's very chaotic,
If you're looking for society for inspiration, I think right now the capitalistic idealization of wealth has people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos in the spotlight. Right. And if you look at those people, first of all, if you don't like rockets, what would you find inspiring about them? And second of all, to look at a larger, for things that are meaningful to me, I don't see those people doing work that is inspiring and helping the world. I would hope there would be more role models in the world who are doctors, who are inventors, who are working on grand scale issue. People who are working on fixing
maybe even farmers.
Oh yeah, well yeah,
farmers.
Yeah, we need those too. Yeah,
crocheters,
creators,
artists,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
creators.
true.
Otherwise,
we don't focus on them at all.
Yeah, otherwise there's like celebrities, right, or athletes. I mean, that's great. That's that can be very inspiring too. But yeah, so I think I mean, if I speak for myself, what I kind of attempt to do is first and foremost, I think try to live in a way that is inspiring to myself, that allows me to connect to that. Sometimes I call it the mystery, what are we doing here?
right.
On the spinning ball.
Yeah, the mean.
Yeah.
Did you ever read Douglas Adams, The Meaning of Life? Which he figured it out. It's 42. That's if you read the book.
That's a good number. That's a good number. Yeah.
It's a great book. I highly
42.
recommend it.
Okay.
Yeah, very entertaining. But it's unfortunately not going to give you the meaning of life.
But the thing is, for some people, 42 may be it. That's their thing. Like ultimately, if we zoom out, like the Big Bang and 13.4 billion years, like this unfolding sort of mystery. What is the sort of meaning of it if you see it in that way? See it in a very physical or material or kind of reductionistic way, right? And I think the one thing that actually a lot of people perhaps put their faith in is so-called science or scientism.
Right.
And the problem is that the way that the philosophy of science is based on what I just said. It's like everything is sort of calculated. Everything is sort of more deterministic. Big Bang happened like billiard balls, and then things are But where's
so you're saying by deterministic? For what my interpretation of that is that science is coming from the perspective that yes, there's a lot of mysteries in the world, but we're working and we're figuring it out, and eventually we're going to have those answers.
Yeah, AI or quantum computing. If you have enough data and enough computing power, you can figure out, right? You can figure out the future. Just like if you had all the trajectories of how you hit the velocity of momentum of a billiard ball, or you can calculate where everything goes, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, maybe for some that's meaningful enough, but I think what I again, this word meaning, that really is the main currency that I like to work with, because and I like the word currency because currency is something you can exchange. And it also has a word current, which is a flow, right?
I was thinking about current as in now, at present.
At present too,
yes,
right? It's something that is exactly like what you're doing, like it's actually bringing you into a focused moment. And so ultimately I think meaning is what you make of it. Find something that matters to you, right? That's relevant, that's salient to your life. And I think most people, and a lot of the let's say the masters, the mystics, the saints, they come to a similar conclusion, which is sort of help others.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And of course, in the same way, we know that if you don't help yourself, you cannot help others too.
Yeah.
So that also ties in. Like when I was traveling, I taught a lot of healthcare practitioners, and sometimes they're the worst at self-care.
Yeah.
They're always giving.
I was thinking about that when talking about my dad's Alzheimer's. Is that it takes a lot out of a caregiver.
Yes.
And going to like support groups and stuff. There's a lot of people who weren't taking care of themselves, so they were suffering a lot because not only was their loved one suffering, but they were not doing what they needed to do for self-care. Yeah.
And when I think of self-care, so sometimes I explain what I teach as self-care cultivation. But by self, it includes the individual self. Like choose a hobby that you yourself like to do, even solitude, but it's also what I consider capital S self, the greater self.
Oh, the societal self.
That's a third aspect of it.
Oh, okay.
I would say the capital S or all caps self is sort of greater self. It doesn't have to be in a sort of mystical, esoteric sense. It can be, like a Buddha, right? But Buddha can just represent an archetype of one who is fully awakened to life.
Okay.
and their actualized potential, right? So you don't even have to choose like Christ or Krishna or Avatar or something. It can just be a vision of your best self. Yeah, like I want to connect to that, right? And I want to really tap into that image, right? That is separate from what society says that is. You know, like you're good, you're a good boy, good girl if you buy this or do that. Yeah. But what is your vision of your full potential? You know, your quote unquote master that you can become, right? Not master over, but sort of. I like this idea of actualizing your full potential. Right?
Yeah.
That creative energy we talked about earlier, allowing it through, right? And expressing it in a way that only you can, right? Sort of like you can hit a note that no one else can hit. Share it with the symphony of humanity.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
No, that's kind of more like the society one. So personal, individual self, like my own sort of path, and then sort of the vertical axis is sort of that higher or greater self, right? For some, that's nature, or we talk about universe, right? More absolute or the ultimate kind of inquiry. And then you have the more lateral kind of axis, which is like relationships. Like what is the kind of self I want to be with other selves. So for me, it's as a brother, right? Or in our context, maybe as sort of a health provider, or in this context, as a fellow conversant, of these kind of important memes. And so I guess as we kind of wrap up our dialogue. Are there any kind of last things you would like to share about either your own story in terms of this main theme of mental health, or what is it that you felt like you shared some things, but are there other strategies that you felt like helped you get out of it or maintain, or are there other needs that you feel like you would like to
people to know that need to be met?
To be met. Yeah. What do you need? What would you need?
Well, I think for me in particular, and I don't know how much this applies to others, but I definitely needed someone to talk to, like anyone. And so I do think that I wish that it was more well known that the suicide hotline, they're there to talk like 24 hours a day. And I've called them when I'm manic. I've called them when I have a mental health, like just a problem. And I open up by, I'm not suicidal, please feel free to disconnect if you need to help somebody who is. But, I'd like to talk to somebody, get a stranger's input. But, if you don't feel comfortable with that or whatever, can't access that, I do just hope that you have someone to talk to that maybe you're able to cultivate in your life, people to talk to, and maybe people listening to try to be somebody that others can turn to talk to. It's definitely something that I would I needed for myself. I don't know how much others would turn to that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Right. Well, I think that was a good conversation. We could go on further.
A lot of side tangents we could do. Maybe a part 2 at some point.
This was quite spontaneous, actually. We had just recently discussed, doing something like this. Similar, and we didn't really prepare very much, so... Yeah, maybe we could do another part 2 with prepared questions or even audience questions. I think it was very real, and of course, if people have, either feedback or questions, we can try to address that. But, let's kind of bookmark where we're at, and I want to thank you for sharing your art, being very very productive and creative. Well,
to end on a lighter note, it ended just in time. I think I got it from my head about the right time for the end of the podcast. But it goes to show, don't believe everything you see on YouTube, because this hat is a video that said 1 hour crochet hat, and just the rim has taken me this podcast plus more. I think I was more than halfway done with it. So the rim has taken me 2 hours, and I still have to make the top of it. So don't believe everything you see on YouTube. But follow my channel, Cristina Impoverished. Cristina Impoverished.
I mean, it'd be I was saying maybe I should have done my wood carving.
Yes.
I mean, there's the I forget who said it. It was some perhaps Greek philosopher or Stoic philosopher that art is long. and life is short.
That's
So it's good
an
if you
interesting one.
if you choose something, and you really want to perfect the art, master the art. I mean, you need lifetimes, and so whether it's wood carving, or crocheting or other things. I think that's also one thing in terms of mental health. Like, I think some people who don't have a personal practice, especially in a creative or a sort of meditative or a kind of engaging way where they can kind of go into flow, it's actually, I think they're more prone. I think they're more prone to maybe kind of
falling
imbalances.
into
Yeah.
depression
So
and
because
manicness.
perhaps everything else in their life is going crazy, falling apart, but at least they have their their practice.
Yeah, something to channel
Yeah.
their energy into
Yeah,
in
that
a
could-
constructive, healthy way.
Yeah, a path. Yeah. So thank you for viewing. Thanks again to Cristina for engaging in this conversation. Hopefully you
Well,
guys
thank you.
received something that was at least fun or inspiring or informative. And
Yeah.
if you have any questions or comments and feedback, you can do so through the information that we'll include below. Yeah. Thank you, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.